There's an extremely scary hadith where the Prophet ﷺ says that a slave will utter a word displeasing to Allah, thinking nothing of it, just carelessly saying it, and because of that, he will sink into the hellfire. As Muslims, are we careful with how we use words, how we speak, the expressions that we use? Careful not to say something displeasing to Allah that will sink us into the hellfire? Here are some common expressions that we hear that Muslims should avoid and never use because they betray a sound Islamic aqeedah and sound Islamic values. First of all, you might hear Muslims say, for Muslims, Muhammad is the last messenger. This is completely wrong because it's not just for Muslims, it's for all of humanity. The Prophet ﷺ was sent to all humanity as the final messenger. But I understand that some Muslims, when they're talking to non-Muslims, they cushion their words and try to soften their words in that context. But we shouldn't use cushion words if it's going to be factually inaccurate. It's not just for Muslims, it's for all of humanity. The Prophet ﷺ is the messenger for all of humanity. But the cushion words are not necessary. Just state what Islamic beliefs are. If you're talking to non-Muslims, they know that you're Muslim. So why do you need to cushion everything that you say with these kind of qualifying expressions? And we don't see others cushioning their beliefs. In fact, people are very straightforward with speaking about their beliefs, but not religious beliefs. We're conditioned to cushion and hide and minimize and even belittle what we believe in. But when it comes to other beliefs, people are very upfront. People are very direct in speaking their mind. For example, have you ever heard a feminist say something like, for feminists, women have the right to choose? Or have you ever heard from LGBT activists that for LGBT activists or for homosexuals, gay rights are important? You never see that kind of cushioning, qualifying language when they're talking about their beliefs, but Muslims cushion and bracket and qualify their claims, qualify their beliefs with this kind of cushioning. So are we going to be more shy about the haqq than these feminists and these LGBT activists are about the batil that they promote? Number two, another example of these cushion words comes when people say, from our perspective as Muslims, Islam is true. Or in our opinion as Muslims, the Quran is true. Again, these are cushion words and they are factually incorrect. It's not our opinion that Islam is true. And when you say that something is from our perspective, it makes it seem like there are other valid perspectives. This is not language that we should use. Allah says in the Quran, فَاعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know that there is no God other than Allah. It's not a matter of opinion. And you can't be Muslim if you think that it's a matter of opinion or it's something that's unsure, indefinite, or unknowable. No, you have to know La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah. So we shouldn't cushion our language using from our perspective and our opinion. When it comes to opinions, two people can differ. I like chocolate, you like vanilla. I like summer, you like winter. Those are opinions and there can be multiple valid opinions. But when it comes to facts, there is right and wrong, true and false. And it's the case that some people might not know the facts. Some people might not be aware of what are facts, but that doesn't mean you qualify and you cushion your language. The problem is that in modern language and culture, religion is seen as purely subjective, opinion-based. There is no right or wrong answer about religion. The only things that are objective and factual are things like science or math or logic. Therefore, we can talk about science in a very clear, objective way without cushioning or without qualifying. Have you ever heard anyone say, from our perspective, water is H2O? Or in our opinion as scientists, matter is made of atoms? Do you ever see that kind of qualifying language for science? Then why do we have to use that kind of qualifying language when speaking about Islam? And there are scientific facts that not everyone accepts or not everyone agrees with. That doesn't change the way that scientists speak about science. So just because people don't accept Islam, why should we change the way that we speak about Islam? Look, I get it. Sometimes you want to be more diplomatic. You want to be more polite when you're speaking to a non-Muslim and you don't want to just bash them over the head. In that case, you can use words like maintain. Muslims maintain that Islam is the truth. Or hold. Muslims hold that the Quran is true. This way you avoid the subjectivizing language, you avoid the perspectivalism, and you don't make it seem like the truth of Islam is just based on opinion. Number 3, science and Islam never conflict. I really don't like this one because I studied the history of science. I know that science goes through all these kinds of changes, and what scientists believed 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago is not what they believe now. Science is in this constant flux. So how can you say that Islam and science never conflict when there are conflicts, and there have been conflicts in the past, present, and in the future? For example, in the 19th century, scientists believed that the universe had no beginning and was in fact infinite in age. And then in the 20th century, science changed its mind and said that there was a beginning to the universe known as the Big Bang. And then now, in the 21st century, you have many scientists who think that the multiverse exists, and the multiverse doesn't have a beginning or an end. So which one is it? Some of these views that science has expressed do conflict with Islam because Allah informs us that He created the universe, and so it does have a beginning. But you had large periods of time in history where science just didn't agree. So there was clear, indisputable conflict between science and Islam. Science is man-made, whereas Islam is God-revealed. Science is fallible, it's imperfect, whereas Islam is infallible, imperfect. So we can't connect something that is perfect with something that is imperfect, something that is man-made with something that is God-revealed. Sometimes science is just wrong. So why would we make this claim that Islam can never conflict with science? This undermines Islam. If we want to be more accurate, we can use a very simple expression. We can say that Islam can never conflict with the nature of reality. Islam can never conflict with the true nature of the universe. This is more accurate because Allah has created the universe, Allah has created reality, and He has also sent Islam. So there can never be a true conflict. But between Islam and science, yes, there can be conflict because science is imperfect, it's a man-made product, and it can be fallible. Number 4, Muslims are so dumb, Muslims are so lazy, I'm so tired of Muslims. Look, just stop whining about the ummah, bro. You don't need to complain about Muslims as a whole. I know a thing or two about whining and complaining, but you have to be nuanced in your whining. Use qualifiers. Remember all of those cushion words? Apply those to the Muslim ummah as a whole. Why should you be down on the ummah as a whole when Allah praises the ummah and says, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas." You are the best of nations brought up for humanity. Or when the Prophet ﷺ praises the ummah and says, "Ummati, ummati, my ummah, my ummah." Who are we to complain about the ummah? So be nuanced, qualify. Say some Muslims, say a minority of Muslims do this or that negative thing. And that way you are factually accurate. You're not insulting the entirety of the ummah. We know that there are problems with some Muslims, so just be judicious with the qualifiers. Say some Muslims are lazy. A minority of Muslims act stupidly. Perhaps some Muslims, somewhere, a minority of them have BO. Cushion your brothers and sisters in Islam. Don't throw us collectively under the bus. Number 5, leap of faith. Leap of faith, leap to faith. This is something coming from Christian philosophers, particularly Søren Kierkegaard, a Danish philosopher. And his idea was that reason can only take you so far in faith. At some point, you have to make an irrational or irrational decision to get to faith in God. But this is not what Muslims hold to be true. As Muslims, we know that reason is enough to justify belief in Allah and also belief in Islam. That's why there are so many verses where Allah says, for example, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمِ يَعْقِلُونَ. Indeed, in that are signs for those who reason. So we don't have this leap of faith. True rationality, true reason can secure and justify one's iman and faith in Allah and in Islam. Of course, aql is not enough. You have to have taqwa, you have to have ihsan, you have to have ikhlas. These are all important values. But this idea that you have to have blind faith or there's no way to rationally be justified in your faith is not a part of Islam. Number 6, write your destiny. Take your destiny, take your fate in your own hands. This is something that we're now seeing from marketing companies. You have Nike telling little kids to write their own destiny and nonsense like this. We know that this contradicts sound Islamic aqeedah. Only Allah controls the future. Our fate, our destiny is in the hands of Allah, and there's nothing that we can do to change what will happen to us in the future beyond what Allah wills to happen. This is the qadr of Allah. So we can't write our own destiny. Allah has written in the preserved tablet, Al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, what will occur, what has occurred, and what is occurring. This is sound aqeedah. We know as Muslims, la hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. There is no power to change and there is no power except by Allah, except by Allah's will. So let's not get confused about destiny and fate just because companies like Nike want to sell more shoes. Number 7, the Quran says. This is something that's not as egregious as some of the things that we've already said, but this is something that can also be a problem. We don't say in Arabic, for example, قال القرآن, the Quran says, we say قال الله, Allah says. So sometimes this is a type of cushioning that you'll find in academic books by non-Muslims where they don't want to affirm that God, the Creator, has said something. So they'll say the Quran says. They'll use this kind of personification for the Quran. So this is something that Muslims have to be careful of. Are we going to play into that secular language as well and use the expression the Quran says instead of Allah says in the Quran? Allah says this and that. So we have to be conscious of this, but I think it's less egregious because in the English language, you do have the expression like the newspaper says, the biology textbook says. And so that kind of personification of a written text is used commonly in the English language. That's why I don't think it's as egregious to say the Quran says, but it is based on your intention and you should just be cognizant of this kind of issue. Number 8, Abrahamic religions. This is a term that we often hear to refer to Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. But I prefer not to use this expression. Again, it's not egregious. I'm not saying that it's haram to use it or you should never use it. I just prefer not to because Allah says in the Quran, مَا كَانَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ يَهُودِيًّا وَلَا نَصْرَانِيًّا وَلَكِنْ كَانَ حَنِيفًا مُسْلِمًا. So Allah is saying in the Quran that Ibrahim was not a Jew, he was not a Christian, but he was a monotheist, Hanif Muslim, only worshiping Allah. And he was not of the mushrikeen, he was not an idolater. So if Allah is disassociating Ibrahim from these religions, who am I to reassociate him with these religions? So that's something that I just prefer not to do. But again, this is a judgment call because it is true that these religions claim to respect Ibrahim alayhi salam. So it could just be a descriptive word, Abrahamic religions. But again, I prefer to avoid it. Allahu alam, Allah knows best. And the final expression, good luck. This is something that's very common in English, and unfortunately Muslims can be using this expression unknowingly. Again, this is something that's very commonly used. It's embedded in the language itself, and it's just an expression of pleasantry or cordiality. I prefer to avoid it again, but it boils down to your intention, because if you think that there is some kind of metaphysical force of luck that can control or affect some kind of outcome, then that can be a type of shirk associating with Allah. Because again, only Allah controls the future. Only Allah determines the outcome according to His knowledge and His will. So we have to be careful about how we use the expression luck. But as for me, I prefer to avoid it. Allahu alam, Allah knows best. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also consider enrolling at Alasna Institute, where we have many online courses dedicated to analyzing and dissecting issues related to Islam and modernity. Enroll today.